Well, this is about improvisation, of course. And the first thing I'll say about it is that everyone seems to come up with their own way of learning to improvise and talking about it. So hearing me talk about it, it's just my way. You may relate to some of the explanations I give, you may not, and some others. And you may hear something different from another teacher and so on. You know, you take things as you will. If it seems to connect for you, then say, yeah, okay, this is good. I usually start out by saying that, in making the comparison, that improvising is very much like talking. When you speak, we speak in sentences, and you don't think about the sentence structure or grammar. You don't think about nouns and verbs and that sort of thing. What you think about when you talk is you picture the thing you want to communicate. Let's say I want to tell you about this mallet, what it's made of. You know, it's got a rattan handle, it's flexible, and it's got a rubber ball, it's wrapped in yarn. Now, as I picture that and wanting to express it to you, my brain does this kind of miraculous thing. It goes to a big filing cabinet, so to speak, picks out the right words, rattan, rubber, ball, stick, flexibility, and so on, and then puts them into a sentence and sends it across to my conscious mind as I'm speaking. So sort of as the thoughts, as the words come into my mind from my unconscious, they come out of my mouth. That's how we talk. We do the same thing when we play. There's a grammar to music, a vocabulary and a grammar, and it's all stored in the brain, and that language ability functions for us as improvisers as well. Our melodic phrases are like sentences. They form in the unconscious, get put in the right order, the right notes to fit the chords and everything, and as they come into our conscious mind, we play them on our instrument. That's how it works. So that's our goal as improvisers, is to become fluent at this process. It's like learning a foreign language. At first, you're translating each word and trying to think of how to make a sentence with them. Eventually, you think in the new language and can then develop fluency. So first thing we want to do is discuss quickly what these basic issues of grammar and vocabulary are for the improvising musician. It's not enough, you can't fake it. You won't fool me anyway if you are playing on a tune, you're not sure what notes are in the chord, and you try some out and maybe they work, maybe they don't. You have to actually know what is available to you and how to use them. So let's talk about chord scales. Every chord has a scale. It's not enough just to know the notes in the chord either. I mean, I played for 3 years with Stan Getz, and interestingly enough, he played mostly by ear, and his only knowledge of the chords was the basic triad outline when he saw a chord symbol. And then he would listen to what the band was playing on that harmony and fill in other notes to make his melodies and so on. He got pretty good at it, so you didn't notice it right off. But once you started playing with him on a regular basis, you became aware of the fact that he was often waiting to hear what you played before he would then play on that harmony, because he didn't know coming into it what notes were actually going to be in use, so he had to wait until he heard it played before he could grab onto them. And it's easy to get overwhelmed by this whole subject of chord scales. The impression is that there are hundreds and thousands of things of them with all these exotic names and so on. If you open a jazz improv book, it'll probably give you that impression. The truth is there are 10 chord scales that are by far the most common and are used 99% of the time. And these are the ones you'll be expected to be familiar with. Then you're rehearsing a tune and somebody says, what are you using on that B flat chord? And someone else says, it's the Lydian flat 7. You'd be expected to know that. That's one of the more common ones. If it's some exotic named scale that someone read about in a book, they're not going to hold you responsible for not knowing that one or the name of it or whatever. But these 10 are so common that you use them all the time. And they have names. I learned them and played them before I knew what the names were, because I'm sort of self-taught. I grew up in a farm town in Indiana, and until I went to college, I was, I just figuring out things on my own. And it was interesting then, to find out what the names of these scales were, so I could put a name on them, but I'd been using them already. You know what the modes are? Shaking of heads, nodding of heads, yes. Well, 7 of the most common scales are the 7 modes. And the improviser thinks of them a certain way. The Ionian, which is the major scale, of course, and when you learn the modes classically, you think, okay, there's this one, there's this one, and this one, and so on. Musically, that's true, but what this really means to the improviser is, what's the color of this scale? Is it minor, is it major, is it dark, is it bright? That's what we need to know about the scale. So the best way to think of the modes is in order of brightness to darkness. So the next one is the Mixolydian, which is a major scale with a lowered 7. And then we get the Dorian, which is the major scale. Now we add one more note. It's getting darker. And then Aeolian, flat 3, flat 6, and then the Phrygian. I'm going to write it all out. 7, flat 3, flat 6, flat 2, and then finally the Locrian. Flat 7, flat 3, flat 6, flat 2, and flat 5. Brighter than the Ionian is the Lydian, which is the major scale with a raised 4. Okay, there are the 7 scales, and you can see, as I said, they're in the order of, there's the brightest, the next brightest, and so on. Now, these 4 are minor. They're used on minor chords. These 2 are used on major chords, and this one is used on dominant 7 chords. We have, that's 7 of them. We have 3 more scales. The Lydian that are common in jazz. The Lydian flat 7, and these are all dominant 7 type scales. Has both a flat 7 and a raised 4. And then we got what we called at Berkeley the altered scale. And different people call this different things. You know what altered notes are. For instance, you've seen the chord symbol that says C7 flat 9. Well, that flatted 9, we call that an altered note. It makes it more rich and dissonant. Or the sharp 9 and the sharp 11. So, if you make up a scale that uses all the possible altered notes, you get this. 1, flat 9, sharp 9, 3, sharp 11, flat 13, and then the 7. So the 1, 3, and 7 make up the basic chord sound. And the other notes common jazz sound. Right? That's called the altered scale. Do you call it something different down here, John?
I like altered.
Okay. A close cousin of this scale is the symmetrical diminished, which is almost the same. The bottom part is the same. But instead of using the flat 13, we have the 5 and the 6 in there. So it's 1, flat 9, sharp 9, 3, sharp 11, 5, 6, and flat 7. And of course, it sounds like a diminished. Oh. again, a common sound in jazz harmony. So those are the 10 scales. Now let's talk about learning these scales, practicing them. In classical music, you generally practice scales by going up and down the scale. That doesn't help us much as improvisers. What we need to have as an improviser is instant recall of the notes in this scale and the ability to play them in many random combinations. So let's say it's the C altered. Right? Now, how I remember that scale is a combination of memory of the sound and memory of the shape, visual, of the pattern of the notes on the scale. So when I see a chord symbol on the music or I hear somebody play a chord, immediately it's like that row of notes kind of lights up for me in my eyes, and I can hear the sound of it in my imagination. That's what allows us to remember these scales. Because when you're playing along in a song, this is the medium tempo song, quarter notes, 4 beats to the measure. Most songs have a new chord every 4 beats. So, new chord every clap. That's how much time you have to think about that chord and play on it as well. So, you don't have time to say, okay, it's an E flat, I can use a G and a B flat, and you're already 3 chords have gone by while you're trying to think about it. You need an instant picture in your mind or in front of you if you play a visual instrument. I ask horn players, what do they picture when they picture a chord outline or a scale? And most of them actually say they picture a piano keyboard, even if they don't play the piano. Some say they see it written out on manuscript paper in their imagination. Some, it's a physical thing with the fingering, that they sort of riffle that scale or that arpeggio and so on. But everybody ends up with some way of visualizing a group of notes. And we need that visualization and memory in order to play fluently. Now, you've all had this happen. You're playing along, new tune, first chord, B flat, no problem, F7, yeah, that's one I know. And then you see the problem coming. It's on the next page. It's an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. And nothing is coming into the mind here, and it's getting closer and closer and closer, and finally it's there. What do? Well, there's choices. One common thing is to take that moment to adjust the horn, and listen closely what everybody else played and see if you could what it sounded like. Pick up some notes from it, which usually works to some extent. Or you say, well, it's an F sharp minor 7 flat 5. The F sharp definitely will work. So you start off with some F sharps to get that harmony going, and listen to see what else you can pick up. And oh, well, an A seems to work too. Okay, I got 2 notes now. Oh, I heard an E. Okay, I got 3. So you get through that first run through without embarrassing yourself too much. Next time you practice, say, okay, I didn't know the scale for that one, the F sharp minor 7 flat 5. So you find the notes and then play around on it. The idea is to leave an imprint on your memory of the shape of the scale and the sound of it. It doesn't matter whether you play it slow or fast. The idea is to imprint a memory of it. And don't just stay in one octave, ramble around, leap around on it to really get your eyes and ears used to the sound of that scale. Okay? So now, job number 1, knowing the right notes that go with each chord. Now, when you analyze a song, you got a new piece, put the lead sheet up, you have to do some detective work to decide, for instance, which of the minor scales belong on this minor chord symbol that you're seeing. Often, and generally, you notice the difference between these minors is the 6 natural or flat? Is the 2 natural or flat? And so on. So what you're looking for is that note. Let's say it's a C minor chord, and you want to find out, is it going to be the Dorian or the Aeolian. So A or A flat is the question. And you're looking, you take a glance, and about half the time in the melody line, you'll see the note that you need to make a decision about. Oh, it's an A flat, so I know it's Aeolian. If you don't see the note, look at the preceding chord symbol and see if it had an A flat or an A natural in it. And if it did, it's going to want to carry over into the next chord 90% of the time and tell you, okay, there was an A flat in the chord that preceded this one, so it's going to be an Aeolian when I get to this scale. There's a little amount of quick detective work that first we do it sort of consciously when we're learning songs. After a while, it becomes automatic. Your eyes see it, you react almost automatically to the clues that tell you which of the scales are going to be the right chord scale. With major, there's only two choices. It's either going to be Lydian or major or Ionian, so you're looking for the fourth degree. Is it the raised or the natural four? Find, look for a clue to which one it's going to be. And sometimes you're not sure, you try one, your ear will probably tell you if it's the wrong one. But we learn those scales and assign a scale to each chord in the song. So now we have the notes. Next job is getting from one chord to the next. Now this happens unconsciously. That is, we're not thinking about all this. Just like we don't think about nouns and verbs, we also don't think about chord scales when we're playing. We'll eventually get to what we are thinking about, but it isn't the chord scales. I don't, as I'm playing along, I don't say to myself, oh, this is a Dorian, oh, this is a Lydian or whatever. I just think that one, that one, that one. The only reason I need to give them a name is if somebody stops me and asks me, what are we using on that measure, and then I have to put the name to it. Getting from chord to chord is another one of our jobs. Called voice leading. The most basic example I can think of is the 5-1 progression. Now, our job as an improviser is to help the listener feel that change of harmony. Feel it coming, feel it make the change. So, when I'm soloing, these are the notes that are making that change happen. I'm going to use those notes in my melody line because I want the listener to hear that harmony change. Now, a good soloist doesn't need an accompanist for the playing to be clear. You don't want to depend on the piano player to accompany you to, in fact, make all the harmonies happen. You want your solo to also suggest the movement of the harmonies from one chord to the next so that your playing will be much stronger to the listener's ear if that's the case. And that's really one of our biggest jobs, is helping the listener follow the flow of the song. Keep in mind that very few people listening to you play are actually musicians. And even fewer are actually experienced enough musicians to understand on the fly while you're playing that, okay, that was an E flat chord, and then that was an E flat minor chord, and then they did shifted up a key 3 steps for the next 2 bars, and it takes a pretty experienced musician to actually analyze what's going on musically in real time. Most listeners, and particularly the 95% of the crowd that are non-musicians, are listening in a whole different way. This is a language that we know as musicians and can speak to each other, but we're in fact entertaining all these people who don't speak our language. So we have to communicate with them in other more intuitive ways. People can pick up all sorts of things. I use an example often of this. Let's say there's a group of Japanese businessmen in the lobby of the hotel, and they're talking to each other. And your first impression is, I have no idea what they're talking about, I don't speak Japanese. But if you watch them for a few minutes, you'll begin to notice things. Well, they seem to be laughing a lot, they're having a good time. One of the guys is holding up a book and talking about it. That must be, you know, what they're laughing about. Oh, now they're bowing. They must be saying goodbye to each other. So by watching, you formed some impressions of what was going on. Even if you were actually wrong, you nonetheless put a story together about this. This is what the listeners are doing. They deal in contrasts. They can tell the difference between major and minor. They'll tell you, that one's the sad one, right? That's what they'll say 9 times out of 10. They can recognize pulses, the steady beat, something to pat your foot to. Oh yeah, okay, I can feel that. They can recognize the difference between something that's fast and something that's slow, something that's rich and dissonant, and something that's plain and consonant, loud and soft, contrasts. So they're getting impressions that they're forming as they listen to the music. They're not getting the specifics, they're getting these generalities. And one of the things that they pick up on is being able to go with the flow of the harmonies as the chords change. So the more you are able to convey that in your solo, the more connection you're going to have to the listeners. Now let me move on here to, I'm going to skip a little bit here. My computer's really slow. Oh, here we go. So now the question is, what are we thinking about? And what is our job here now? We've got the basics, the grammar and the vocabulary kind of thing clear. Our job is to be a storyteller. This is what we do with our melody as we put together a solo. And it's a classic concept, developing a theme and variations. It's often referred to as. You introduce a thought, like a little fragment of melody. And then your job is to do something with it, to show the listener what's interesting about it. It's not enough just to play right notes, harmony after harmony. It soon becomes kind of boring. There's nothing builds, there's no story. The listeners want to follow you doing something. And you as a storyteller want to, in fact, draw them in and hold their attention and build suspense and entertain them right up to the end of your solo. That's your goal as a soloist. So, developing a theme. There's a theme, 4 notes. It's got a rhythm, dun, 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 dun. It's got a melodic shape. This is an arpeggio going down. I could have used the same rhythm, but played a different melodic shape. That's a half step, a leap, and a resolution. Very different in context than the arpeggio. And it usually suggests the harmony outline. In this case, it's major 7, E flat major 7. So my job now as the soloist is to start with that phrase and repeat it and make variations on it. I can change the octave, I can play it faster or slower, I can extend it, I can play it backwards, I can displace where it is rhythmically. The list goes on of different ways I can play this little phrase. My goal is to play it lots of different ways, and for you as the listener to hear me doing this, to get interested in it and see what am I going to do next with this phrase. Wow, oh look, they did that. Well, I didn't know you could do that. You know, that's the thinking that goes on with the listener, is they want to be surprised and impressed with how you work with this thing. So this is Green Dolphin Street. You probably all know it. There's one chorus, and I hope you could tell I was using that theme throughout it, right? Changing the speed, changing where I played it, how I placed it, and so on. The extra challenge is, of course, I have to keep transposing it because the harmonies keep changing. So first I'm in E flat major, then it's E flat minor, and F, E, and E flat, and so on. So I have to keep changing to stay with the changes. But that's mostly what I'm doing as a soloist. When I play on a tune, I start an idea, and I see where I can take it, see what I can do with it. And just like when you talk, you get some sense of whether it's, you've talked enough about something. When we're talking to an individual, you get the message because they start going, okay, yeah, I got it. And you say, okay, time to stop talking about this and move to something else. Or you see them looking kind of quizzical and you realize, okay, I haven't got my point across yet. I need to be more clear and add some more information and so on. We do that sort of subtly with the audience. Most musicians like to look at the audience, at least occasionally. Even if you look at your instrument, most of the time I still want to look up and see faces, because I get a sense of feedback from the faces that I see. Are they moving with the music? Are they smiling and watching me and paying attention? Or are they nodding off and watching the ceiling or whatever? I mean, I get information back from seeing the people's faces. And most all musicians I know, if you go into a concert hall and they turn off the house lights and you're staring into the blackness, they'll tell you, oh, no, I need a little bit of light. I need to see faces a little bit so I can make contact with the audience. Even when I'm recording, I have to imagine people listening to the music. If I don't, I don't have a full sense of if it's shaping right, how long to play this, and so on. And so I picture in my imagination people at home listening to the record, and it gives me a sense, at least, an imaginary sense of connection with an audience. So I don't know where you are in your improvising now, but if you already are pretty comfortable with the chord symbols, chord scales, and so on, and realizing the harmonies, then the next stage you're at is trying to make more sense out of your melodies. See if you can pick a theme and how long you can stick with it. Usually it's the chord symbols the chords changing that push you away from your idea. Because it was one thing to play it on the first chord of the second chord, but now we're into a C7 altered and this and that, and do well to find the right notes, let alone try to keep my melody going. Start practicing it first on very easy tunes, where the changes don't change rapidly and move around a lot, and see how long you can work an idea. Beginning players, one of the faults that I notice with student players is each theme is if they have one at all, it's only developed for 4 bars or so before they lose it, and then they go on to another one. It's like somebody changing the subject every 2 sentences, and you say, well, what are you talking about here? I mean, I just got started this, and now you're talking about something else, and you're talking about something else, and so on. People can't follow that. They need to follow something that's being developed over a while. And you'll notice on record that some solos by master players, the entire solo is one theme developed. Where they'll just hang on to it for 3, 4 choruses, and that's their entire solo. Other times, they might have 2 themes, one that they're working on in the A sections of the tune, and the bridge, they have another theme because it's in a different key and different harmonies, and then they come back to it each time they play the bridge and so on. I mean, there are different ways to do this, but the idea is for your story to be interesting enough that and clear enough when you play that all those listeners out there, those non-musicians, can stay with you and follow you as you do these clever, creative things. There's nothing worse than finally in your 3rd chorus you do something really hip, but nobody notices because they've long since tuned out following what you're doing. And what people do when they tune out, if they can't follow the music, they start paying attention to other things, like how you look. The drummer's head going up and down, and you're soloing over here like crazy and they're watching the drummer. You're competing with other things. And in fact, even visually yourself, If all anybody gets from watching me play is, boy, he sure can play fast. Look at all he does it with all those sticks and stuff. If that's all they get out of it, then I failed. You know, I didn't get them emotionally. I didn't sell them on this song and take them along on my solo. Now let's talk about the songs. A song, most student musicians don't get nearly enough understanding of what's going on in a song. And one of your jobs is to show people the song. Imagine you're going to show somebody around in your new house. You come in the front door and you say, look at the view of the lake over here. And we open up these double doors and there's this wonderful walk-in closet thing, and check out the lighting in the kitchen, isn't that cool? And so on. We need to do the same thing with the song. So if you are playing a song, ask yourself, what do I have to show the folks here? And if all you can think of is, well, there's these chords, you know, that's not much to show them. You need to be able to say, okay, in the first four bars, there's this inner line that's moving down through the harmonies that's very sweet. And I need to bring that out in my solo so the listeners hear that. There's a pedal thing going on in the bridge. That's a different kind of thing. They'll be able to hear that, you know, for what it is. There's a nice chromatic motion in this other section coming up. You know, identify things in the song and say these, you know, I need to now demonstrate these, bring them out in my solo for the audience to hear it. Because if you should only play a song because you really have some belief in it. You like it. And you ask yourself, why do I like this song? It's the cool changes in the coming out of the bridge, or it's this interesting time feel that happens and so on. And I love the way that extra bar in this section, you know, kind of changes the feel is when you get to that part of the song. You need to feature those in your solo and show the people about the song. A song also is very much like, a song has these elements. A song also has a character. It's like you've been given a part in a play. And you know, you're an actor and you look at your script and you're seeing, okay, the part I'm supposed to play is a witty, sophisticated, kind of Cary Grant kind of person. You probably don't know what Cary Grant is, do you? Well, a witty, sophisticated guy. So I need to picture that. And what actors do, you know, they get into character. They sit and they think about who this person is that they need to become when they walk on stage. Or let's say the part you've been given, it's somebody who's depressed and sad and lonely and messed up. So they have to get into that frame of mind so when they play their parts, it'll be convincing. Well, every tune has its character, has its emotional state, its feel. And you'll identify this and say, okay, this is kind of a dark and moody piece with some rich things happening here, and it's very spacey and so on. Or this is a peppy, punchy, exciting, dancey kind of piece and so on. You'll give it an emotion, an emotional state. And as we're playing, the unconscious is taking care of feeding you the melodic lines. And the conscious mind, one of the jobs it has while we're playing is to kind of hold on to that emotional state that we've decided the tune belongs in. Just like an actor doing their part holds on to that character state that they have to be in. There's nothing more disappointing to me than hearing a band play a really interesting song, and they get to the end of the melody chorus, and I'm anxious to see what they're going to do with this really unusual tune. And then they forget the tune and it's this bebop from then on. Plain old cliche lines that sounds like a million other tunes. And I go, wow, what happened to this great, interesting tune that you started out with? If the tune is interesting enough to play, then it's interesting enough to stay with when you solo on it. And part of what allows you to solo in that character is if you keep focusing consciously on this is the feel of this song, that sends an instruction to your unconscious to give you musical sentences that match that emotional state. this is a, maybe I should talk about this a little bit here. Where's the eraser? Oh, here. When we start learning music, at first, everything we learn is a conscious thing. The teacher tells us, here's the fingering for this note. Okay, we got it. There it is, it's a B flat, okay. So it's all conscious. Very quickly, things start becoming automated. We no longer have to check the fingering to do a B flat. Our fingers will go right to it very quickly. So pretty soon, fingerings, knowledge of scales, etc., start to move from the conscious to the unconscious, so that we're soon able to sight read at tempo, easy pieces, without having to stop and think, how do we play a G, or if it's a little round circle with a staff, it's 2 beats, it's called a half note. We don't stop and think about those things anymore. We know them intuitively now because they've moved from the conscious side over to the unconscious. As we get further along, more and more stuff that we're learning. We're now improvisers, we're talking chords and chord scales and things that tune structures and so on. More and more of this comes over into the unconscious, till eventually everything is over here, pretty much. What's left is the one thing I mentioned before, picturing the feel or the state, emotional state of the tune. And it has another job, being a critic, but let's come back and talk about that in a second. This unconscious stuff over here, it's nice to think of it as having a dual purpose. One part of this unconscious is like a filing cabinet. All this information, this is one of the marvelous things about it. All this information that we've learned from studying music, from playing music, from listening to records, is stored over here in little bits and pieces. And your brain has a way, it knows how to combine those bits and pieces into logical things, not just random combinations, which wouldn't make any sense melodically. It has a sense for how to combine them into a musical sentence, just like our brain does this with words, so that we don't speak in gibberish. It puts the words in the right order and sends it out, to us to speak. So one part is the miracle filing cabinet. The other part is sort of your personality. This part doesn't change much, and it only changes gradually. Style, the way we play, the same about the way we talk. Everybody's voice and way of speaking is a little bit unique, which is why when a friend of yours calls you on the phone, you know who it is within the first couple of words they say. They say your name. Hey, Gary. Oh, I know, it's Steve. Even a little bit of sound will tell you if it's somebody you know well. And yet there are millions and millions, billions of people in the world, and yet we all are a little bit unique from each other in the way we talk and sound. Why that happens, I'm not sure, but that's something that is a fixed thing about us. It may change gradually over time. If I move to New Orleans, I'll probably, gradually get a different accent than the one I've had, but it doesn't happen suddenly. So you as a player also have the same kind of thing. A style develops. Some people have a very, very obviously unique kind of style, just as some people have a very unusual way of talking and are even more identifiable. But even if you're not that unusual, still, your people who listen to you play on a regular basis will identify your playing, quite easily, because they'll recognize your little collection of idiosyncrasies and certain things that you do. So we've got these two things over here in the filing cabinet, in the unconscious, and they are working together to send over what we're going to play, these melodic phrases that are coming out of this part of our brain into the conscious. Now, I don't know if you've had this experience. See if you have. You're playing along, it's a familiar tune, you know the chords, you're comfortable, you're having a good time with your friends, and for a moment, you played something you didn't expect to play, you didn't see it coming, and it was a really cool lick that you just played, and it kind of, ooh, wow, what was that? Does that sound familiar? Have you had that happen? Okay. What's going on there is, one of the last things the conscious guy over here gives up doing, I mean, all this other stuff he's handed over to the unconscious. But the one thing he still keeps doing is he acts as a gatekeeper. That is, wants to see what you're going to play, at least for a second or two before you play it, to make sure it's okay. He's not too confident that he can trust the inner player yet. But this guy gets relaxed now and then, gets casual. It's feeling good. I'm thinking about some other things, and the thing goes right to the instrument, bypasses the conscious mind. And when that happens, you feel like, whoa, I didn't see that coming, and it feels like I'm out of control a little bit, and your first instinct is to get back in control, because that was kind of scary. Although, you'll admit that it was probably the hippest thing you played all night, was that particular lick, and it really felt good when you played it. So this started happening to me when I was about 17 years old. I still remember I was just starting school and sitting in a lot at a club, and the first couple of times it happened, I thought, did I imagine that? It was something like deja vu or something? Or was that something that I thought happened, or did something real happen, or what's going on? The more it happened, the more comfortable I got with it, and I began to feel like, okay, go ahead, just play, let it play. And now when I start to play, I sort of take a mental step backward in a way, and I start watching the playing. As soon as I start a tune, I'm just watching the playing go down as if someone else is playing, and my conscious mind is disengaged from choosing notes and all that sort of thing. So I now have other things for the conscious mind to do. Picturing the feel of the tune and acting as a critic. I talk to this guy in there. I don't say, play an A and a C on the A minor chord that's coming up and make 2 8 notes and this and that. I don't give him instructions that way. I say, this is really getting boring. You better do something more interesting than this. Or this is so busy nobody can follow it. What's going on here? I talk to the inner player as I'm watching it play, giving critique, so to speak. And a lot of times I don't think about the music at all. You may have noticed that in your playing. When you're soloing away and the hands are moving and the lines are coming out and everything, and I'm thinking about the plane I have to catch tomorrow, or that hat that the second row is wearing that looks really silly, or whatever. And the rule is, the conscious mind can do anything it wants to, except get in the way. You can think about random stuff, you can watch the music happen, you can concentrate on the tune, feel, and so on, but you can't interfere with the flow. And in fact, the conscious mind tends to do this. It'll drift in and out. Somebody will do something in the band, my attention will, oh, that was interesting. Oh, the drummer is messed up again, Jesus. Your mind is thinking about those kinds of things. All the time, you're still playing. That's the state that you get to as you become fluent, the way if you're fluent in language and can speak, comfortably about anything and everything. This is fluency for the improviser. Now, let's talk about, let me check the time here, see how I'm doing. Okay, let's talk about a little bit more about the connecting with the audience. Most people go through this sequence of how they perform. Unfortunately, we all start out playing based on fear. Fear of making a mistake. Think of your first lesson. Okay, here it is. And oh no, use the third finger for that note. Okay. Oh, no, that's an F sharp. You know, that's the one, see, with the little cross in front of it. Okay. So you learn right away. You know, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to be careful and cautious, keep everything figured out, and make sure before I make the next move so I don't get in trouble, you know, and so on. And we function that way through elementary band and into high school, mostly based on you know, got to make sure our part is correct. This is why band directors with younger players have so much trouble conducting. Nobody's watching the conductor. They're all buried in their music, terrified that they're going to miss a note, and not aware at all of the rest of the musicians. So as you mature, you gradually become more and more aware of the other players around you. Wow, there's a whole band here, and we're all supposed to be playing together. So at some point, if it's going to happen, you will make a transition from being fearful and cautious to being confident and expressive and spontaneous, because that's what we have to be. And it's two opposite things. You can't be both. And at a certain point, most of us make the shift over to, you know, loosening up and doing that. And at the beginning, now that we're playing more maturely, we tend to first play for ourselves and our fellow band members. We play for ourselves because we spend a lot of time playing alone in practice. And it's only us in there listening to us play. And we are our audience. Then we finally get the chance to start playing with other musicians, and they become our audience. Now we're entertaining each other. And in fact, the goal of most young musicians is always to impress our peers. I want to impress the other musicians. I don't care what the audience thinks. You know, there's a musician I know that's sitting in the front row. That's who I need to connect with and need to impress, or the other musicians in the band. And in fact, I can always tell when I go into a club or a concert if the band is playing for each other. It's as if they're having a conversation amongst themselves and I'm eavesdropping. Imagine that's happening. A group of people over here, there's 4 of them, 5 of them, they're having a little conversation with each other and so on, and you're watching from 10 feet away. What happens if all of a sudden they all turn together and start talking right at you? Ooh, you know, hey, okay, you know, much stronger. That's the difference. And what happens when you picture the audience, and this is the other thing that comes into this, is picturing the audience. If you picture the audience as you play, think about them listening to you, it will help you shape what you play. Pace it better, shape it better, keep it more interesting, timing of when to do what things in your solo. The same as when you talk to somebody, the feedback you get visually from looking at them, their faces, helps you shape what you're saying. And you will communicate much more effectively with the audience if you are thinking about them. What tends to happen is, in many cases, musicians are not used to playing in front of audiences, and when it first time they get up there, and whoa, there's 1,000 people right in front of me. You know, there's this sense of, I don't know if I can handle this or not, and the solution is tune them out. And I'll just concentrate on playing and not think about them. And that becomes then a way of playing, but unfortunately you're not including them in your playing experience when you do that. So if you find yourself a little bit of stage fright or getting disconcerted, hang in there and get used to it, because you need the audience. There's a famous joke, I won't get this right, but you'll get the point. Comedian dies and wakes up in the other world, and his head is full of the funniest jokes, one after another, hundreds of them. It's fantastic. He can reel them off, and they're hilarious. And the guy says, yeah, well, he must have gone to heaven, right? He says, do you see any audience? So we need that audience. We need someone has to hear us, and we have to communicate to them. Okay, I think I've used up my time pretty much at this point. Any questions? Anything? I've covered a lot of stuff real quick here, kind of give you an overview of things. Yeah.
Since you said you were self-taught, when you first started hearing, feeling the scales, and exploring the scales, how did you go about trying to extract lots of different, or what processes do you think happened when you began to start to interpolate the notes and the scales and make new melodies and shapes?
It started with copying the harmonies I was hearing first, the chord voicings. Okay, and then when I soloed, I would use the chord voicings as source material on that harmony. And then I began to figure out, oh, I can actually fill in more notes as well that seem to fit. And of course, I would hear other people playing on records using scale fragments and so on. And so it became clear after a bit that, okay, there's a scale that seems to fit this particular C7 chord. And it's the one with these notes in it. There's another C7 scale that's on another tune. It seems to be like this. And so I had them all kind of memorized. I just didn't have a name for any of them. There's that one and that one and that one and that one and so on. So when I got to school, it was great because here they are. There's the names and there's the list of them. I said, okay, I know every one of those, and now I know what to call them as well. But I've been using them already, just learning by ear and learning by. I said self-taught, but that's not exactly right. When I was 16. I found a piano player and took lessons from him to show me tunes and how to reharmonize tunes. So I got a good introduction in a way to harmonies from him just as I was finishing high school. But he didn't know the names of the scales either. He knew the chord symbols and had nice voicings and stuff, but that's sort of how I learned. There were no method books for the vibraphone. When I started playing the vibraphone, it was only 20 years old as an instrument in its infancy. So it was great timing for me. I got to be the pioneer of some techniques on the instrument as well as just ways to use it in musical settings. If it hadn't been me, someone else would have discovered the same things in due time. But it was good luck for me that I happened to come along at the time that I did. But I learned to play from just playing songs. My father would order sheet music whenever he heard a song on the radio that he liked, and I would learn it. And little by little, my knowledge of harmony and songs and playing the instrument all kind of just gradually evolved. I started playing when I was 6, and discovered jazz when I was about 13. And then I got more serious about it. It was sort of just fun up to that point. And then I got really energized once I discovered jazz.
I had a question about listening to the rhythm sections, comping and stuff like that. Would that fall in the conscious or the unconscious, or where exactly would you put that, and how are you aware of what they're doing and able to internalize it?
This is a good topic, comping. Because we have a lot of instruments that are comping instruments today, and even if you're a horn player, you may have to, in fact, straighten out somebody who's comping for you badly, and tell them how they should change the way they're doing it. The biggest mistake that accompanists make is a mental one. First of all, they make an assumption that their job is to provide the harmonies, to lay down the chords, as we say. That's not true. The number one job is rhythmic. The good soloist doesn't need the chords. He can outline the chords just fine on his own. What your job is is the same job as the drummer's job and the bass player's job as well. It's to hit your chords at the right time to help the time fields stay centered and comfortable. So think in terms of your rhythmic role more than, it doesn't even matter whether you play big full chords, single notes, a couple of notes, whatever, do the job just as well. It's when you play more than what you play when you're an accompanist. Then the other thing, which is the more subtle one, is you have to change your mindset. When we play, we generally put about 75% of our concentration on our playing and 25% on what the others are playing. I'm soloing. It's my turn in the spotlight, and I'm doing it. And I'm listening to them to make sure we're still together and seeing what things they might suggest to me to put into my solo, but it's mostly I'm concentrating on my playing. But when you're accompanying somebody, you have to turn that around. And instead of putting 75% of your attention on your playing, you have to put 75% of your attention on their playing and only a smaller amount on your playing. Because if you follow the soloist really closely, you will not get in their way. It's impossible to happen. I used to have this constantly with student groups. I would hear, the band playing, and then I would stop and I'd say to the piano player, I said, okay, tell me what the trumpet player was doing in his solo. Give me a little description. What was it like? What did you notice? I don't know. I was busy with my chords here. You didn't notice that the trumpet player, he made a mistake on the first change of the bridge. He did a chromatic thing that was real interesting on the last 8. You missed all that? I said, yeah, I was busy here. And it's not a natural instinct to do this. Your natural instinct, trained after many years of being careful to be right and always making sure you're doing things correctly, is to focus on your own playing first. So you have to intentionally, remind yourself to listen to the soloist. I kind of pretend that I'm playing the other instrument, that I've got another set of arms that's playing the saxophone over here when I'm playing behind somebody. And it's not hard to do, because the truth is, if you're a piano player, you're soloing here, and your left hand is accompanying, right? The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is going to play until the moment it's played. It's coming out of here, it's in the last split second, goes from the unconscious right out into the instrument. That's when the left hand also gets to know what the right hand is going to do and acts accordingly. You don't have to have 2 minutes advance warning to know when to comp. You just listen to somebody and you'll feel where the empty spaces are, where the accents should be placed, and so on. And if you're listening intently, you will not get in the way. You will not force anything onto the soloist. I hate that. I'm in the middle of building something here, and all of a sudden the drummer decides it's time to go into halftime or something. Wait, I didn't suggest that in my soloing. There was no hint of that. I've been in the middle of doing this here, and now you made me change, and I have to do what you're doing. No one wants that to happen. And if everyone's listening to the soloist really well, it won't. It'll work just fine.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I was just curious. I know for a lot of us, to get heard, we go out and play jam sessions and stuff. How did you get people to hear you when you were starting off your career? I mean, did you bring the vibraphones around with you?
Yeah. I started playing gigs. I played as a child. My family all played instruments, and we had a family band. I'm the only one that went on to be a musician, but we did that until I was in my early teens, and I got interested in jazz, and then I wasn't interested in playing with them anymore. And but I was used to gigging. We played 100 gigs a year with our little family group, and I quickly found, I lived in a small farm town, and about an hour away was a big city, Evansville. Wow, 100,000 people. So I would drive. My father would drive me first. I was too young. And I would sit in at local clubs, and guess was well enough. I did well enough for people to invite me back, and eventually I got my driver's license, and I could drive myself, and started working gigs for real. and just kept on doing it. One thing leads to another, and the gigs get better, and so on.
How'd you pick up the stand cats? How did you start playing with stand cats?
Well, there was a succession of stepping stones that led up to that. In Evansville, there was a saxophone player whose name you might have heard of, named Boots Randolph. Yakety Sax was his hit record. Boots married a woman who lived in Evansville, and so he lived there. Meanwhile, he was commuting once a month or so to Nashville, which is about 3 or 4 hours drive, to be on records with Elvis and whatever in the background. And found out that there was a guitar player in Nashville who was talking about making a jazz record and was complaining about the fact that he liked vibes, but there were no vibes players in Nashville. And Boots said, well, you might want to hear this kid from Indiana. So he drove me down there a month later and with my vibes, and I played a couple of songs with this guitar player. And he asked me what I was planning to do, and I said, well, I finish high school in another month, and then I'm going to college in the fall in Boston. So he suggested that I move to Nashville for the summer, and we would play at this local club, and we'd make this record, which is what I did. The guitar player's name is Hank Garland, and it was my first record. And at the end of the summer, I had sufficiently impressed enough people around Nashville that I was offered a record contract with RCA. So I went off to school with a record contract. And my first full-time job after school was with George Shearing's band for a year. And then I was back in New York, wondering what was going to happen next, and I got a call from a bass player that Stan Getz was looking for a piano player, but had been unable to find anybody available, and he had a tour to Canada, and he was desperate, and somebody had suggested maybe me playing the vibes with 4 mallets would work. So I went and auditioned for Stan. He didn't like it, and I didn't do well at all. So I figured, well, that's that. Then a week later, the bass player called me back and said, we still haven't got anybody else, and will you do it anyway? So I did, and see, what I didn't know is that Stan was one of the most finicky people when it comes to people comping for him. And I'd had very little comping experience up to that point. I played with 4 mallets a fair amount, but I hadn't really done much comping. So I would try different things, and he would get all frustrated and yell up to me to lay out and so on. But by the 3rd week, we sort of found how to play together. And then I ended up playing with him for 3 years.
I know you've had a lot of really amazing guitar players you played with, and I was curious if you could talk a little bit about the relationship with the vibraphone and the guitar.
Yeah, the vibes and guitar is a wonderful sound combination. We can play separately, or we can play together, and it sounds like yet another instrument. There's a blend that happens between the 2 instruments, and it becomes like a vibe-tar, another instrument that's a bigger, fuller sound of the 2 of them. And so that has worked well for me. I haven't always had the vibraphone guitar in the band. I've sometimes had piano or horns and so on, but I've had some kind of special thing with guitar through the years, starting with Hank Garland, who I'd never even thought of playing with a guitar player till he wanted to do this, and then that kind of got me going in that direction. And then I've been lucky to have played with a lot of the best guitar players of my generation and younger through the years. A lot of them started out in my band, in fact. And we're having a big reunion at Berkeley next month. A lot of all these players that started out their careers with me. It's going to be fun. Yeah.
I was going to ask you about composition.
That question was a little soft, but I'll tell you, he was asking about compositions. I consider myself a very good judge of interesting songs. I'm very particular about what songs I choose to play, and I don't write much myself. I get an idea for a song about every 5 years, When I was younger, I wrote quite a bit more, but I wasn't that thrilled with the experience of writing or with the results. All my friends, I felt, were better writers than I was. So I tended to use their songs more than mine, and gradually wrote less and less. So I get an inspiration occasionally, but not too often. And but for me, the songs have to really be well composed. There's kind of two approaches to creating songs. One is sort of the hunt and peck style, where you play a few sounds. Oh, that's kind of interesting. We'll use that. Well, here's something. Oh, that's a nice. Okay, we'll add that, and so on. And so you get kind of a flow of random things, and there's a song. A good composer actually composes. That is, structure and form and things, happen in each part of the song, and everything relates to everything else. If you study composition, musical composition in school, that's what you learn. When you study counterpoint and you study composition, I look for that in the songs that I play. So, among the best jazz composers, I would say, are Chick Corea, Pat Metheny, Wayne Shorter, today's crop of people. And some people, to me, write the same two songs over and over again. They've got a fast one and a slow one. And they mix around the elements, but essentially it's the same kind of tune over and over again. There used to be a time when jazz musicians played songs by lots of different composers when they put a record together. But two things happened to change that. One is that you get a lot more money from the record if you write all the songs yourself. And what's more, in many cases, it's the only royalties you see, because the artist royalty part of it is going to pay back the production costs of the record, which may never get paid off, but you get the publishing royalties right away and in full. And there's a sense that all the major jazz musicians write their own material, so there's a peer pressure also to compose your own stuff. So I listen to lots of records, lots of artists, and a great many of them I'm not impressed with their writing skill, and I wish they played more interesting stuff than what they're writing for themselves. The exceptions to that are some of the people I just mentioned. I mean, Chick Corea is the most prolific writer that we have alive today in the jazz scene. In the same sense that Duke Ellington wrote 2,500, 3,000 songs during his career, Chick has done the same thing and continues to crank out original music just year after year after year. And it's interesting, fascinating, in all different kinds of idioms of music, just really amazing. And so I look for those kinds of composers. Carla Bley is another one of my favorites. Very solid compositional structure to the songs that she writes. Was that sort of what you asked about? Okay. John.
Before we give you a little break, would you be so kind to play something for us?
Okay.
Ones of us that were at the forum yesterday, we really had two wonderful treats, but I don't think everybody was there. So.
All right. This is a Keith Jarrett song called In Your Quiet Place. next event, huh?
What we're gonna do next, give him a chance to catch his breath, but we have 3 combos that I've asked to play. I haven't asked you to play in any set order, but doesn't really matter.
the background you played in the melody, in the opening head, I couldn't hear you. You were a little scared or something. Get up a little bit, okay? It's a challenge, even for mature players, to play this kind of tempo. The challenge is to swing, but not be on top of the time field. And I don't know anyone's name, so I'll just tenor. You did the best job of anybody in terms of locating where to play and on the beat, and a little bit laid back. You were a little on top all the time. If you just laid back more, what you played would have sounded twice as good. Because the lines you were playing were fine, but it was just like you were right up on the top of where the beat is. And in this kind of slow, languorous kind of tempo, you really have to get a little further back on it. What else did I write down here? Nice opening phrase to your solo. I'm always preaching this. You want to start the solo with a kind of a declarative announcement. It's my turn now. This is really going to be interesting. Pay attention. You're going to love this. You don't want to spend your first half of chorus kind of warming up. Imagine you're giving a speech and you come out and the first thing you say to the audience is, "Well, I'm not sure what I'm going to talk about yet, and I'll think of something in a minute. Just hang on." So you did it right away. I was interested in to see what you were going to do next, and so on. Nice. Alto, some occasional wrong notes. So I felt you either weren't that clear on what the exact chord scales were that went with the harmonies, or what notes you had available, and you would stick to the chord tones for the most part. Then you would try a note or two just sort of to see if it would work or not, and sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. So I would send you back to make sure check out the scales a little more. You had the best realization of the harmonies of anybody. I wasn't quite sure of what the changes were to the tune until we got to your solo. Very clear, well played. Bass also was very clear in terms of the harmonies. Drummer. In the middle of the tenor solo, you went into kind of a backbeat thing for about 4 or 8 bars, and you slowed down when you did it. And I thought, oh, is this going to really slow down? And then you kind of recovered after a while when you went back to playing regular time again. But all of a sudden, it was starting to really pull down when you went into that kind of figure. Otherwise, it sounded fine. Okay, time for another short one, or what?
Would you have any suggestion for how maybe they could shape the ensemble part of it a little bit more?
Well, this is obviously a tune that's built around the guitar line, and as such, that's in fact the fact that you came up with just a little bit of a horn background was, more than I would have probably done. So I guess I don't have a suggestion beyond that. Because I think that line worked best as just the guitar, particularly when you're playing the faster parts in the second half of the melody. It'd be hard to emulate on a horn.
Cool. Very nice.
Oh, God.
So do you make them memorize this?
Oh, that's actually, John makes us memorize. There's a triumvirate.
Good, yeah. You were much more together on the head going out than you were at the beginning. Still a little rough at times, you know, it's a tricky line that you got there, so a little more practice on it probably would be good to tighten it up. Let's see where to start here. For both guitar and trumpet, you need more fluency on the scales of the tune. You're stuck with too few notes to make your melodies out of, and it's, besides just playing around on this scale. Let's say this. I don't know what the tune is, but let's say the first scale is an A minor Dorian. Play around on it, making different combinations. Get more fluent at, you know, running those notes, so that when you get into it in a tune situation, you're not limited to just the three that you seem to have found for that chord. Another suggestion along the same line is, just as an experiment, try to play the tune slowly, improvise on the tune slowly, but play non-stop eighth notes, right? So I'll pick a tune that I know. I'll say Green Dolphin Street. That also teaches you how to lead into the strong notes of each chord. Right now, I feel like you're having to sort of jump to the next chord tones, work on the next harmony, and so on. So what I'm talking about is more fluency with the scales that you have available to you, and making the line kind of weave and flow more comfortably. Both of you, I feel, could be stronger at that. You didn't solo. I don't know if you drew the short straw this time or what, but no. Tenor, good realization of the chords. That was, again, I finally got to hear what the tune was, the chords were of the tune when I got to your solo, and so on. And the piano solo also was very clear, easy to follow. You're comping too busy and too loud behind the piano, particularly because it's a piano, soft instrument. You have to get way down to get beneath him. And then you're comping about twice as much as is appropriate. Keep in mind that comping, it's not, it's misleading. Our job as a comper is not to provide the harmonies, lay down the changes, as we say. He has the changes, he knows them, he can play them by himself. Your job is rhythmic. That's the #1 purpose of comping. And so you want to only hit when you can help the rhythm feel, stay comfortable. And you certainly don't have to play something on every chord or play more or less continually or anything. You could leave a lot more space. And you don't have to play full chords either. You can play one note, two notes at a time, so on. If you feel like it's time for a hit, it doesn't have to be a big full thing, it could be a small thing. But think about it being rhythmic. But the most important is not, as they say, not what you play, but when you play, when you comp. I couldn't really hear you comping over there because it was too far away, so I can't comment on how you did in that regard. I might make a comment here about the length of solos. I'll ask you generally to answer this question. How do you know when to end it?
We've talked about this in combos. We talked about trying to have a communication going on with all the players.
Well, you did fine in terms of passing it on to the next player. You signaled at the end of your solo that you were winding it down, and the next player surely, would get that and be ready. It helps the audience as well to feel like it's a smooth transition. You did that fine. The question was more, how do you know this was your last chorus?
Well, it depends. If it doesn't sound good, you end as soon as possible.
Okay, well, what I'm getting at is most people, I think mistakenly, tend to solo until they feel like they have accomplished something. They've peaked, or like got the energy going, and now I can quit. It's much better to have in your mind, when you start the solo, a plan of how long you're going to play. Say to yourself before you start, this is about a 2-chorus tune. This is a 3-chorus tune. You can change your mind if you're practically walking on water in that 3rd chorus and you feel, hey, I'm going to do another one. Nobody knows that you had a plan to only play 3. You can play another one. But if you have a plan, you will shape your solo much more effectively, knowing this is my 1st chorus, there's going to be a 2nd, and then I'm going to end it. So on the other hand, if it's indefinite, waiting for something to happen, it's like waiting for Godot. Sometimes you don't know. Not many people get that, I guess. He never comes, is the thing. So I always have a plan. I always have in my mind approximately what I'm going to do. And sometimes I change my mind when I get there, but it helps me shape the whole solo more effectively if I've actually made that decision, rather than waiting for something to happen and so on. And sometimes I cut it short, like you say. It doesn't seem to be going anywhere. I let someone else give it a try. I do that too. Okay, thank you.
Could I ask you to elaborate on one point you were making about the guitar comping on the piano solo? Since you play a choral instrument, how do you feel about having people comp behind you? Like sometimes if I'm playing a piano solo, I'd rather not have any guitar at all.
I wasn't going to unless he asked me.
Well, I'm okay with not having more than one comper, so to speak. I'm also okay with everybody comping. I've had bands with guitar, vibes, and piano. That's my current band, and we all play. all the time. The trick is how much to play. And the theory I go on is it should all add up to one comper. So if there's 3 of you playing, you're going to be playing a lot less than if there's only one person accompanying, playing chords. So it gets more challenging as more people are joining in the mix. But there's musically it works very well. You can find lots of examples on recordings where there's lots of people all comping at once and it sounds fine. It's just, you have to stay out of each other's way. And I made this point earlier in the improv workshop that if you really are listening to the soloist with your full concentration, it's almost impossible to get in the way. If, on the other hand, you're mostly thinking about your comping and, ooh, my chord, now I'm going to be minor next, and then not really listening to the solo that's being played, you may be playing the right chords, but you're going to be clunking them down in rhythmic places that don't fit with what he's playing. And when I used to teach, I'd notice this happening, and I would stop the band and ask the piano player or the guitar player, okay, tell me what the trumpet solo was like. What kind of things did he play? And I don't know, I was busy here with my comping. I didn't notice. If you do this unnatural thing, naturally we want to focus on our playing first, and then we leave about 20% over to listen to the other guys. For comping, you have to reverse that and really try to put most of your thinking and concentration on listening to the soloist, kind of living that solo with the soloist. Almost, I try to imagine that I'm playing the other instrument. I have another set of arms and I'm playing the saxophone as well. And then my comping is close enough, following enough of what the soloist is doing that I'm not going to get in the way. That's my sort of theory about comping. Okay.
Yeah, thanks.
Bye, guys.
While the last group is getting up, are you working with a team now?
Get a fresh page out there for you guys. Oh yeah, what's the song? Okay. Could you say it louder again to hear?
This is Punjab by Joe Henderson. One, two.
Okay, first suggestion, during the intro, I guess it was, the horn play, and then the piano would play a little break, and then back to horn. You have to get a lot softer when the piano plays. You can't play at the same volume level as you did with the three horns, or it seems out of proportion. Now, about this soloing. I couldn't identify the changes well enough during your solo. I couldn't hear quite what they were, so you weren't making them clear enough. And it also didn't sound like you were intentionally playing outside the changes either, which my ears would have believed that. But what I got instead was sort of just, I'm not sure. It was unclear what was going on. So that's was my reaction to that. Trumpet, good realization of the changes, heard them very clearly. You play too much, lots and lots and lots of eighth note runs, eighth note lines. Mix it up more, use some triplets in there, leave more spaces in there. Don't let it become all da 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 da. It's very boring to the listener, so you need to change that up more. Tenor, you're playing just a little bit too much on the top of the beat for a medium tempo tune like this. Just relax it a little bit more and it'll sound twice as good. In fact, the one or two spots where you doubled up, played twice as fast, that they actually were at the right place, so you were hard to play them. But where it was just the eighth note lines, you were pushing them a little too much, trying up yourself, you were trying too hard to get them out. And if they had felt a little easier, they would have felt more comfortable. A good way to practice that is to listen to yourself back, record yourself and listen to it back lots. And your unconscious will begin to hear the subtle difference of where to place it in the time. That's something you can't practice consciously to do differently, because once you get into playing, it's sort of unconscious. But you got to send messages to your unconscious by giving them that's one of the great things about being able to hear yourself play, is the unconscious gets a real insight into what it's creating. And you can make corrections and do things differently later. Was that too deep that I just got into there? Okay. Piano solos. I started off with too little energy. It got interesting, after you got going. But remember, when you start the solo, you have to get people's attention. They've been listening to somebody else, and their instinct at that point is to, okay, finished with that solo, and let's see what's going to happen next. And if you don't say, hey, over here, this is where, start off with something stronger, and then come down a bit if you want to. But there's this assumption that a lot of people have that all jazz solos need to start soft and simple and gradually build more and more intensity until you peak and it's over. That's actually very difficult to do well. It's much easier to play in waves. Build some, drop back down, build some more, drop down, build some more. But I always believe in starting off the solo pretty clearly. Here I am, I'm next, get your attention over here, and so on. And I was about to give up on you after the first 16 bars, and then then it got more interesting, and I sort of came back and listened to the rest of your solo. Bass solo was interesting. You stuck with a certain sort of three-note motif there for a long time, and actually sold me on it. First I thought, is he really going to do this? And you just kept on doing it. And I grew to like it, actually. Drums, very musical solo, extremely. Drum solos, I'm not keen on them as a rule. Because there's a reason why. Drummers learn to play in actually a fairly bad way. They practice. They do 4 of these, and 4 of these, and 4 of these, and 4 of these, and 4 of these. Everything is 4-bar or whatever. Play the same figure so many times and then move to the next one and so on. So then when you want to start to be sort of musical, it's hard to break out of playing repetitive patterns all the time. And many drummers, that's their solos, are just lots of repetitions of things as they move around the set and so on. Yours, you were playing melodies. I could hear the tune. I could hear the solo and the lines you were making up. Very musical, very natural. Nice use of varying the dynamics as well. Softs, louds. You kept it very interesting all the way through. Okay, guys.
So we have the luxury of a few minutes left. If you have a burning question that you wanted to ask Mr. Burton. Still a little time. You can pick his brain. I was kind of disappointed that more people weren't here picking his brain at 12:30.
You put a lot of movement in that.
I guess it's more
isn't really relative to the point. Probably video camera and video yourself playing. Watch it. Say, okay, now I have to change over. Watch it. Get to it. See if it doesn't. Start I don't. I did. He asked an interesting question, which is, do I transcribe things? And I never have. I did it in school when it was assigned to do. It wasn't hard for me to do. I grew up, I had perfect pitch as a kid. So hearing the stuff was easy, and I go, okay, write it out, and so on. But I never felt I learned much from doing that. Other people swear by it. I know teachers and players who say, oh, I learned so much by copying out the solos and learning to play them and so on. Some instinct in me said, that's not going to help me. And so I've never done it. And I've never tried to play anyone else's solo or in anyone else's style. I have no idea how to do that. I know musicians who could sit there at the piano and play like 6 different piano players and convince you. Now this is Chick, this is Errol Garner, this is this guy, this is Herbie, and like, wow, I couldn't sound like Milt Jackson if I wanted to. So it's different players have different talents, I guess, in that regard. Any other burning questions? Yes.
Have you ever dealt with performance anxiety or like trying to get yourself into a headspace to perform? I guess growing up in a family band, you might not have.
Yeah.
At this point. But
there's something about if you start performing as a kid, stage fright is sort of unknown to you because you've got used to playing in front of an audience when it didn't matter to you. Kids don't think that much about that sort of thing. They just go do it. But there is you want to get keyed up a certain amount when you go out to perform, but not get too keyed up, or then you do start to psych yourself out. So there's a certain, I sometimes have to play little head games with myself. Occasionally, there would be a major musician show up in the audience that would totally unhinge me. I looked up one night at the Village Vanguard and there was Bill Evans. And I said to myself, whoa. And so I said, what I did was I said, you know, there's a guy over there that looks like Bill Evans. And I kept telling myself that as I played, and I never looked over there again. And I came across this one. My brother-in-law is a famous actor. I won't say who he is. I went to see him. He was on Broadway in a play, and I happened to be in town. I saw that he was there, so I bought a ticket. And I didn't realize it when it turned out to be in the front row, sort of off to the side. And after the show was over, I waited around the lobby for him to come out. And I said, oh, hey, how you doing? And then he said, oh, that was you, wasn't it, sitting in the corner? I said, yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be so close. He said, yeah, as soon as I saw you, Said, I can't look over there again, or I'll start to forget my lines, and you know, not because I'm any kind of a judge of acting, but just because it would make him start thinking about me being there, and then it would distract him from, you know, his part that he had to play. So there are certain people. One guy that totally shakes me up every time that he's in the audience is Chick Corea. He and I have been playing together for 38 years, and we've played, I don't know, at least 2,000 concerts together. But when he comes and sits in the audience, I can't stop thinking of, oh, well, he thought that was silly, I'm sure. and this tune got to be dumb, you know. And of course, and every time he comes up afterwards, loved it, oh, that piece, oh, it was wonderful. It never fails. And apparently this happens to everybody. I went to a Pat Metheny concert once, and it was so crowded, there was no place to sit. And I sat on the side of the stage, and Pat and Lyle both said, well, you know, we couldn't think, we couldn't concentrate. Every time we look over, you were there. So I do feel sorry for people who have serious stage fright. It affects classical players a lot more than jazz players. Because with classical players, people know the music that they know every note of the music that they're going to play. The jazz player, after all, no one knows what we're going to play in our solo. They don't even know, if, in most cases, that we hit a note we didn't intend to hit when we make little mistakes here and there and that sort of thing. So I tend to, you know, rationalize that, you know, it's my inner player that's doing the playing anyway, and if it goes over well, I get the credit. And if it doesn't go over well, hey, it was his fault, not mine. Yes, John?
All your experiences, maybe you could recall one that was particularly magical. I'm sure you've had many, but those stories are always fun to hear.
Boy, that's a tough one. Well, as you say, there are certain lots of gigs through the years that were you know, high points. You know, everything clicked that particular night and so on. Oh, I'll tell you a story. But this one still kind of is a little bit amazing to me to this day. You know who Samuel Barber was? Classical composer. I got to know Sam, and we talked for 2 years about doing a project together. I was introduced to him by my record company, who had an interest in our classical division, would like to do something different, something new, and you know, any musicians, classical musicians you're interested in playing with. And I thought of the Guarneri String Quartet, and they said, what about composers? And all I could think of were dead people. And then I said, well, one of my favorites is Samuel Barber. And he said, oh, let me call him up. I said, oh, wow, you're kidding. Called him up and made an appointment for me to go see him. So we started doing things. I played tunes that I had written. Wouldn't do that now, but in those days I was fearless. I would play him songs I had written. One song that I had based on one of his, a little piece, part of an opera that he wrote, and I loved this little interlude, and I turned the changes into a song. He didn't particularly like that, but he liked another one of my tunes. Anyway, we kept talking about doing this, and he wanted to learn about improvisation, because he didn't know anything about it, really. You know, he sort of enjoyed hearing jazz occasionally, but didn't know how it worked. So I spent a lot of time when I would go out to his house, and we'd spend the afternoons, and I would try to explain the chord scales and how we make up the melodies and so on. And finally, he said he wanted to hear my band, because we were thinking of using my band on this project as well. So one afternoon, we took the whole band up to his house and set up and played some, and then he decided he wanted to try playing with us. So, you know, wrote out the changes for a blues and showed him the chord scales and got started. And he was an interesting improviser. He was very bold. He would start melodic themes and start developing them, and whoa, this is getting really. And then he would forget where he was in the tune. but we'd have to stop and we'd try again, and he would do this. We did that for about an hour, And he seemed to get a real kick out of it. And as I was driving back home after that, I thought about this and I said, this is really something. I have just, you know, taught Samuel Barber how to improvise, and he sat in with my band. And the odds of that happening. So we never did the project. He chickened out.